and welcome to this very exciting conversation, preparing for your cloud-native future. I'm Phoebe Go from NetApp, and stay with me for the next 20 minutes as we discuss the future of Kubernetes. More and more organizations are using containers and Kubernetes for production workloads. In fact, a 2020 CNCF survey had 92% of respondents mentioning that they currently plan to use or are using Kubernetes for production workloads. This is an increase of 300% since 2016. And of course, with this incredible rate of acceleration and adoption, infrastructure continues to modernize to keep up with this need. Organizations want to be able to use Kubernetes for their mission-critical workloads with the same levels of performance, reliability, and of course, data protection that they're used to in their legacy or more virtualized environments. And this is, of course, on top of the fact that they need to keep their teams up to date with what's going on and reducing that continuous operational burden on re-architecting and refactoring applications. Okay, so the Kubernetes ecosystem is rapidly evolving and innovating at a pace that we haven't seen before. What is the rest of the world doing to keep up? What's necessary? What's critical? And what's just noise? Today, I am joined by some industry experts to talk about what's needed when it comes to storage and data management for Kubernetes applications. So joining me today, and they're going to pop up in a minute, are Enrico Signoretti, who is an internationally renowned expert on data storage. Hey, Enrico.
Hi, Phoebe. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you today because you are a visionary in this space. You've blogged about it, you've spoken about it, and you've tracked this industry for years through GigaOM research, obviously as an independent analyst, a contributor to the Register, and regular podcast guest as well. It's good to have you. And my other guest today is Eric Hahn. Eric is the VP of Product Management for NetApp's cloud portfolio. And prior to NetApp, Eric was involved in the co-founding of Google Kubernetes engine at Google. So welcome, Eric. It's good to have you today.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Enrico and Phoebe. Thank you.
This is going to be fun. So let's start by talking about application modernization, why don't we? So I mentioned that this requires infrastructure to keep up. Enrico, as you know, infrastructure changes, what are we seeing in the space of storage and data management for Kubernetes?
Well, it's interesting because we moved, past the point when enterprises were, testing and doing the first projects with Kubernetes. Now there are massive infrastructure. Many of these users now think about having a data layer that allow them to move application around. In fact, Kubernetes, the beauty of Kubernetes is that more or less it's the same identical product, no matter if it's deployed on premises or in the cloud. When Linux started many years ago, we had this problem of multiple distributions. So yeah, the kernel was similar, but actually several distribution mechanisms, several ways to organize the Linux file systems, everything, was different. And it was difficult to manage even portability of some basic stuff at that time. With Kubernetes, we don't have this problem. So when you start looking at containerization of your application, you find that, wow, this is very portable. We finally have something that is portable. Actually, the problem becomes data. So it's very hard to port, to get this portability of data. So more and more enterprises want portability of their data. So they are looking for, a data foundation layer sometimes, something that can build this connection between private and public cloud, between multiple clouds sometimes. And this is what it really, challenging for the vendors, but at the same time is really fascinating because we are finally getting to a point where really we can move the entire application stack and the data from one environment to the other, depending on business needs in the end.
Well, I wanted to jump in and just say that, Enrico, I was reading your paper and you were talking about platform and platform capabilities. And I feel like that kind of fits into this story, Phoebe, that you're asking, which is, as I think about applications and infrastructure, there is a platform in the middle, right? And so there are things that we've done or Kubernetes allows that makes that platform able to build in the cloud, build on-prem. And so from an infrastructure modernization, there are things that we need to do to respond to both the platform aspects and the application aspects. And I think some that have been very successful, we've been running in public cloud with Astra, for example, in the hyperscalers. And that's a place where there's an ability to scale out because the cloud gives you the ability to scale out and consume as a service. So in some ways, infrastructure is already getting remade right in front of us. And then on-prem, I think it's a different set of challenges. And this is where we do want to make sure that there's this capability to leverage existing services and extend them into Kubernetes. But I think this challenge of how platform and data services, I like what Enrico was saying, that is the next set that we have to go answer. So I think it's a very exciting times, but obviously there's a lot of challenges in terms of what customers are trying to do. And I think the only way that I've seen it being addressed is to provide actually a couple options. So I think I'm excited that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Enrico and Eric, you both kind of mentioned the portability and needing a platform that kind of gives you the flexibility to choose where you want to run it. Because I think we're still in that era of not really being sure how public cloud and private cloud and how they're all going to work for our future applications and our existing applications as we modernize them. So I think that's a really interesting place to say, well, build a platform, and the platform will give you the capabilities across public, private, wherever you happen to run it. So today, though, Eric, there are a couple of different ways that customers provide storage to their Kubernetes-based workloads. What are customers asking for from NetApp and others?
Yeah, I think both from a set of data services and how you experience. If you look at it, containers themselves, we already had in the past a way to abstract hardware, right? So virtual machines abstracted server hardware, block storage abstracts storage hard drives, right? So I don't think people are asking for hardware abstractions these days as much as they're looking for how does applications consume services or native services, and compute is an example, compute and memory. And actually what Enrico was saying is the data services and data protection, as you're pointing out, Phoebe, how do I get the ability to have a genomics application drop in and it needs to write files and needs to be able to access. So there's been this need, or there's been this ask for how do I, in my existing environments in the cloud and on-prem, do these file services and do it natively. But obviously there's ways to do that in your existing products, but there's also a need for us to solve it from a platform aspect. And that's where we've been doing Astra Control Service in the public cloud. We've been doing Astra Control Center on-prem. And that's really a way to say, I can get the best of what I need from my existing infrastructure, but extend it into Kubernetes, provide that native file services. But as we go further and further into new form factors and new deployments, we're now starting to see things like, how do I deploy into oil rig? Or how do I deploy into different hardware form factors where what I really need is to consume infrastructure platform and provide it natively into the applications. In some ways, all those workloads, all those applications has become all the ones that we talk about from an application modernization. It's CI/CD, it's real-time pub sub. And that's kind of what's pushing this, is the application has this constant need for evolution and change. And we're going from not just on-prem and cloud, but we're going into new form factors all the time.
So yeah. Are you seeing Astra Control Service and Astra Control Center being that kind of platform, no matter where you're deploying Kubernetes, just for my own?
I think from both a cloud experience and a hybrid experience, absolutely, right? So there's a need to say like, hey, I'm running Cloud Volume Service, I'm running ONTAP, and then from that perspective, how do I move between this portability word? How do I move between clusters, and how do I move between environments or data centers? Those all come up, and we have to be able to natively handle both the data as well as the management and the data protection. So those are coming up all the time. Enrico, you were saying something?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I agree with you. I had a lot of conversation in the last year with large organizations that are moving to Kubernetes. Some of them have massive projects to move like 50, 60% of their organization to the cloud. Okay, but they are keeping some services on premises, and uh, and they want the options. That's what I can call this. Idea. I mean, option to do everything that will be needed in the future. So when you say I want to move my application, I want to migrate stuff from on premises and the cloud, and even go back on premises if necessary. So they are splitting the infrastructure between several clouds, sometimes just one. But the idea is, okay, I'm choosing the cloud for the flexibility. I'm choosing on premises because maybe it's cheaper, and I can have better control on some resources, etc., etc. So the idea is option is the key. So you want this platform, this storage services that are available everywhere, and you want them to be enterprise grade. So you can't mm, put your mission critical application in something that is not similar to what you had, you know, forever. So that's the idea, and this is the way we are going, and most of the demands that are coming from the field.
So that's like really interesting because we're seeing these needs for data services, but obviously what we traditionally know of as data services being these big shared storage arrays, boxes, won't work on an oil rig and they won't work on a car. And so how is the technology around storage, data storage, evolving to keep pace with how the applications are also evolving, and maybe shrinking would be a way of putting it. Eric?
Yeah, I'll have some thoughts, and I'd love to hear from Enrico as well, because I like his point about options and enterprise grade. I think where we're going in terms of servicing that, and I'll jump to your question, Phoebe, is that from a file abstraction or from a file services, that's the part we're trying to make sure is served as enterprise grade data protection, file services, and more and beyond. And I feel like from that aspect, the way we can get to this options, to your question, Phoebe, the way we can get to these other form factors is at NetApp, we've been building using Kubernetes for years. A lot of our cloud services are deployed using Kubernetes, and they also both provide services to Kubernetes, and they themselves are built in Kubernetes. So what that really means is we're taking a scale out microservices approach. And when we take a scale out microservices approach to serve volumes in the cloud, or now to serve new form factors on-prem, that allows us to do an N+1 architecture. I can start to consume and have the option of start with a couple servers, add more servers, and scale out effortlessly, but then provide that enterprise grade data protection. So the architecture, to your question, Phoebe, is changing, and it's being built in Kubernetes. It's being natively integrated, and it's being consumed and experienced not just as a application developer where I get to say I want to drop in and write, but it's also from an administrative point of view. We're now getting to the point where I don't need another set of plugins. I can do kubectl or some other set of RESTful APIs, and I'm already interacting with one common control plane. So that control plane and the microservice architecture, by being built for this is where the years of building in the public cloud and bringing it on premises with Astra Data Store, we think that will create that new form factor options as we go into these new deployments.
Well, we'll have to come back to that because I want to ask you about Astra Data Store. But Enrico, what are your thoughts on that space?
Well, in general, if you think about new infrastructure, so edge, cloud, and on premises, and the fact that Kubernetes actually is everywhere now. I mean, there are edge distributions. So the idea of having a cloud native storage layer is fundamental to make this happen. I mean, moving the application and the data around. So you have a common layer, and depending where you are, you want different type of resources in the backend. It could be an NetApp filer, it could be a cloud volume, it could be whatever. Okay. So in the end, if we look from the application perspective, nobody cares. Okay. No, you want the availability, you want the resiliency, you want performance, you want everything. But really, you can't ask a DevOps guy what's behind the scene. I mean, they don't know, they don't want to know. Okay. From the other perspective, if you look at from the infrastructure guy perspective, then you want something that scales, that is manageable, that is easy to use, that you can give to data center guys and say, this is, an extension of your enterprise storage. This is something that you can understand and you can deploy at scale. So you have to look at this problem from the two perspectives, not only from the DevOps teams, but also from the infrastructure operation teams, and finding the right balance of services, of self-service functionality that many DevOps teams want, etc. It's the complexity is there, but actually, if you find the right balance, then you can crack the problem very, very quickly.
That's awesome. I really like that. That looking at it from both perspectives really speaks to me as a practitioner, somebody who's tried to make, that journey from an operations team where I grew up into the DevOps world. And I think that really speaks to me to say, how do I do this, across both of those perspectives? Hey, Eric, I want to quickly come back to something you mentioned, Astra Data Store. Can you quickly give our audience just a one sentence, what is Astra Data Store? And then the second part is, how is that different, aside from the way that it's built, how is it different to the rest of the NetApp ecosystem?
Yeah, I think actually the example you're giving fits it well in terms of what we're trying to solve, which is Astra Data Store is Kubernetes native storage, and it's providing that enterprise grade data protection, as well as those scale out file services that applications want. But I think in terms of how it's different, there's some challenges that we've seen in the past architectures that we feel like we wanted to solve, right? I think I can today go out there and I can try to DIY or build a set of data services. But what I lack or what I don't get, and what NetApp is providing with Astra Data Store, is this is a scale out architecture. It's using native protocols, and it provides where you can use things like your standard NAS clients. So me as application developer, I get to have minimal rewrites, minimal toil. And as Enrico's saying, I don't have to think about where the data services are coming from. In this case, Astra Data Store will do it for you. And since it's a scale out native into Kubernetes, it means that administratively, I have less to manage. It's integrated into my existing tool chain, and I can grow my data services as I grow my cluster. So there, it's really to ease into, but provide all that management that, from your perspective as an administrator, you just want it to work, right? And it's actually, Phoebe, your point that actually, in some ways, I want to highlight is that there is this dichotomy, or there is a choice that teams are having to be forced into that is unfortunate, which is they have containers, they want to run containers, but they also have legacy applications or applications that aren't going to get touched. And they may be running in a virtual machine. And now I have to decide which one to use. But here we've made some intentional choices with Astra Data Stores that we actually support both containers and virtual machines. And from that architecture, right, it's just like you're pointing out, it's that I can say, I'm going to run containers. I have my existing virtual machines. Let's give the capabilities to both. And as I give capabilities of both, back to the Astra control aspects that we launched earlier this year, we can run it and make it hybrid. We can make it multi-cloud, multi-cluster. So it's very much enterprise grade storage and file services, but Kubernetes native. And as we extend it, we're trying to give that hybrid option so that customers can be on a form factor and have multi-cloud. So I feel like in some ways, we want to make sure that the hard choices are made for them, done, and solved by Astra Data Store. And so what you get is really that data platform or those data services. And it's actually something that we hope people can sign up, or it's something that people can sign up for now.
Yeah, it's in preview. I understand Astra Data Store is available now, and you can go to netapp.com to sign up for that preview. But we'll do all the plugs at the end. Enrico, this kind of speaks towards that platform of data services across public cloud, private cloud, and providing all of those options that you spoke of. Do you see this extending past, just today's, availability of providing storage? What's kind of next for data storage in the Kubernetes space?
Well, in general, we are seeing that there is a lot of demand to get more visibility in the entire stack. Okay, so the idea that your application is, or your container is producing some IOPS, but actually it's part of an application, and then this application is part of the larger ecosystem. Now, at the moment, there aren't many solutions that give you full visibility on what is happening in the system, in the backend. So getting full visibility, statistic, predictive analytics. This is something that is in high demand at the moment. Uh, Also because many of these infrastructure guys that we mentioned before, they already seen most of it already, and they now pretend to have the same thing for their new toy. So that's the idea. This is the first thing, and it's fundamental. And as we mentioned, looking at the edge is the next step for everybody. So and scalability in this case is not in the amount of containers that you can manage in a single cluster, or the volumes that you can manage in the single cluster, but actually we are talking about hundreds or even thousands of clusters under management. So you want mechanisms to automate all of this: federation, policy management at scale, and everything that can help you to manage a fleet of Kubernetes cluster that is dispersed across the globe. So these are new things. I think a different scale from what we are used to deal with, but actually it's becoming. I think it's the next evolution, both for Kubernetes and for these kind of services. It will take a while, but actually the conversation pop ups more and more often.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I do like to think about that scale of Kubernetes and the fact that, right now we have tool services like Astra Control Service, Astra Control Center that can start to automate some of that, create that autonomy around policy management. Eric, any guidance to customers or people thinking about Kubernetes? What should they do today?
Yeah, I also wanted to just say, Enrico, I love that answer, and I feel like there's so much as we give options that we need to solve that visibility parts. So those things are coming together, and I feel excited about how that will integrate and provide that choice to customers. In terms of Phoebe, your question about getting started today, I think there's ways that I can consume, and let's pause for a second on Astra itself. Right, as I decided to start my journey in Kubernetes, there's a couple things where I want to pick the use case and the workload to get that experience, but I also need to then transition from use case and workloads to think about the platform aspects. So if the use case workloads, I think getting started with things like CI/CD, getting started with regenerative applications, that's a no-brainer, or that's probably a place where there's immediate ROI. And then if I look into the platform and the things that I need to make a choice, it starts to become the questions that we've been discussing. Do I want to be hybrid? Do I want to be multi-cluster? Do I care about portability? And ultimately, the answer is it is going to matter to you, right? It's going to matter in terms of your maintenance. It's going to matter in terms of how you have end-to-end data protection for your applications. And then as we go further and further, I think these options and the data fabrics that NetApp's always been building, it's really continuing, right? This is Kubernetes and Astra is really a continuation of data fabric. It's just that this time we're taking the data fabric and making it Kubernetes native. And so I think there's no end to where we can take this in terms of mesh architectures, edge architectures, as Enrico was saying. So I think once we start this, there's actually quite a few ways that it can improve, both in terms of experience and results for IT, but also in terms of the applications themselves. So I think, just getting started with one of them, and if there's any way we can help, I think that would be what I would encourage.
Yes, awesome. Definitely. If I can ask anybody, it's reach out, because I love having these conversations. All right. Enrico, how can our viewers get in touch with you and read about some of your predictions as well?
Yeah, you can find you can find everything of me by googling my name. So I think I am the only one, Enrico Signoretti, in the storage industry. But the other way is to check on gigam.com for my write-ups and blogs and everything.
And Eric, how about you? Are you a social media magnate?
Well, I think it's probably an area where they can just reach out to me at radio_Eric. And Phoebe, with you, it always feels like it's possible. So.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. We actually have gone longer than I promised Enrico and Eric we would keep them for. So I will let them go and get back to building the next generation of Kubernetes native data management and technologies. If you are interested in Astra or any of our conversations today, join us. The link is down below at cloud.netapp.com/Astra, or reach out anytime at netapp.com. Thank you all for joining. Thank you so much.